Welcome to Orthodox Theology. This is Craig Truglia, and today we're doing a fun show called Bad Marriage Advice. All right. And before we get started, I just want to tell everybody that if shows like these bless you, the beginning we'll speak with the saints before we have some fun and do some jokes. Please help the mission in Cambodia at orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate. Links to Patreon, Venmo, and preferred PayPal are below. We have an anonymous donor that's willing to match every dollar up to $2,500 for those who want to help build the wall in Sihanoukville around the church to help protect it there because the government knocked down the wall. So again, if you want to have a matching contribution from the anonymous donor, simply put wall or some sort of memo about the wall in your donation, and you will be dollar for dollar matched up to $2,500. And so all donors have my thanks. Obviously, also pray for the mission and pray for me. Now, that being said, before we get started about bad marriage advice, I think it's good to get into good marriage advice from the saints. And so we have from St. Paul a very obvious teaching. But I want you to know that the head of every man is Christ, the head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. All right? So we see here that there is a hierarchy in submission, not in superiority, because God the Father is not superior to God the Son. Man is not superior to woman. And in humanity, Christ is not more human than man is, but there's submission in all of these relationships. And so how might this look in a marital context? St. Peter says the following: wives, likewise, be submissive to your own husbands, that even if some do not obey the word, they without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives. All right. So we see submission from a wife isn't predicated upon the husband being worth submitting to. This is explicitly what St. Peter writes against. He says, even if they do not obey the word, right? Women are called to be submissive to their husbands because it has the potentiality of actually saving that person's soul, right? That they could be won over by submissive conduct, not by convincing them or arguing to them or manipulate them to otherwise, but by submission. So this is what that scripture says. Now, Elder Thaddeus, in Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives, says the following. He'll be canonized ultimately, but he says, often there is no unity or oneness of mind in our families because wives and mothers transgress the commandment of obedience to their husbands. God wants married people to be of one mind. By disobeying God's commandment, they create an atmosphere of Hades in their own homes. So as we see here, the saint gives the interpretation of the scriptures as we're seeing that there needs to be submission and obedience. Like when there is some sort of judgment call that has to be made, there's loggerheads, someone has to obey ultimately. Someone has to submit their will to the other person's will. And the refusal of married women to do so with their husbands creates an atmosphere of hell. And so, right, God doesn't give these commandments as some sort of bludgeon or because he's misogynistic, but rather God wants to prevent us from creating a hell on earth. And you'll definitely have hell on earth in your family if we ignore these sort of teachings from the saints. Now, we see this from St. Paul, where he says that wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. Therefore, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. So not in some things or only when it's important or something, but in everything is the ideal. Ideal is not always reality, but the scriptures and the saints always give us ideals for us to strive for. So for the wife, this idea to be submissive is to be submissive in everything, just like the ideal monk is completely submissive to his spiritual father. Now we're going to get into that's going to be very different in a marital context in just a second. But that is the ideal in everything. It's not conditional upon the husband being good or always having good ideas. Now, if it's a horrific idea, you should try to push back in a very nice way. But the ideal is to be submissive in everything. All right. So St. John Chrysostom gives a reason for this. And the idea is to avoid chaos. Now, St. John Chrysostom writes in his homily in Ephesians, and just as when the generals of an army are at peace with one another, all things are in due subordination. Whereas on the other hand, if they are at variance, everything is turned upside down. So I say, it is also here, wherefore says he, wives be in subjection unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. So as we could see, and God bless you, Oscar, that we want submission because otherwise we get that atmosphere of chaos. The army can't win the battle if people are listening to commanders. The family can't win the good fight against Satan if there's chaos in the home, even if everyone has good intentions. Just like an army with everyone good intentions and maybe even good fighting abilities isn't going to win that battle without organization. And that organization in both contexts is there has to be obedience. There has to be submission to authority. All right. So we see this in First Peter. It's a two-way street. It also applies to husbands, but there's a different twist. There are gender roles, according to the saints. So St. Peter writes, husbands likewise dwell with them, that's their wives, with understanding. All right. Dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as to the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. So the teaching here is that husbands aren't to rule over their wives and lord over their wives, but actually care for them. And when things don't turn out the way they want, to be understanding and careful, right? Not to shatter someone whose feelings might be fragile, right? Like the weaker vessels, what's being talked about here, like with something that could break. We want to be careful and understanding. And the ideal is everyone to be of one mind and have compassion for one another. And what we see is by wives submitting, husbands being careful, the saints teach, that this makes it easier to work through issues and come to one mind. And with one mind comes compassion. All right? Compassion's not matter you work yourself up to love someone else per se, but it's that coming to one mind is the ideal. Now, we have this in Simeon of New Smyrna in the book, The Spiritual Father, which I think gives us some nuance in what's this look like in the real world. He says that Saint Barnasufius writes, you know that we never exercise forceful authority on anyone, on none of them. All right. Do not force someone's free will, but plant the seeds in hope. Monastic obedience, in regard to its latitude and longitude, differs from that of the Christian life in the world. For this reason, the spiritual child does not owe the obedience which an elder can expect from a monk. Right? So in the world outside the monastery, do not think you could just command your wife, husbands, and she's just going to give you military obedience. Right? You could plant seeds. Here's what you ought to do. You could try to, as the head of the household, try to create circumstances that lead to good decisions, but you shouldn't be forcing obedience. This is not where someone signs up to totally have their will cut off, like a monk signs up for when joining the army of the monastery, per se. Right? So it looks different in the world. The end goal is the same, right? It's not justification for a woman to be not submissive to her husband, but the husband doesn't have the excuse to command military obedience. He should try to be the spiritual head of that household and set up the circumstances that are to the spiritual benefit of people in their household and the teachings that are to the benefit of that household and the scheduling, right? We go to church, we listen to the teaching of the priest to bring about those positive ends. Now, Father Daniel Sazoyev says something very similar in his letters. He writes, the expression head of the family signifies that the husband must know how to make important decisions and explain them to his household in clear, convincing language. It is just too often men who convert to orthodoxy begin thinking that scriptures entitle them to military obedience. So we see the saints are not manosphere, right? They're not bras. that are saying, put that woman in her place, right? Being the head of the household is not commanding obedience, like I said. It's trying to create the circumstances and the teaching and atmosphere that is the benefit of submission and spiritual growth. Now, we have this from the scriptures. St. Paul writes, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave her himself for her. Let each one of you in particular so love his own wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Now, there's been whole books written about this. We see it to the right, love and respect. It's not that husbands shouldn't respect their wives and shouldn't love their wives and respect their wives rather, than wives shouldn't love their husbands. But there needs to be an emphasis, and that scriptural emphasis that St. Paul writes about is that wives need to respect their husband because that's more difficult for a wife, right? To owe respect. Oh, I love him, I nag him, but it's because I love him. But that's why you have to put the respect above the love. It's not that you don't love, but the emphasis has to be on respect. Because otherwise you have chaos. Men perceive love through respect. Just like for men, it's easy to show like respect to one another, right? We know I'm not going to cause a fight with that guy because of who he is. And men generally try to avoid fights with their wives over, little things, right? And so it's easy to show respect, but the wife will take that for granted that she shouldn't be treated in a very disrespectful manner. It's the love that she'd be looking for, right? So showing that love and attention is where the emphasis is. Doesn't mean a man shouldn't respect his wife, but the emphasis is on love. Now, we spoke about the saints, the fun part of the show, and we're going to need your feedback, all right? And I'm writing this down. Your feedback is necessary, all right? It's time for bad marriage advice. And as a quick apology for bad advice and the typo down there, is that on this channel and in my body of work, I do a little bit of everything. I've published peer-reviewed history. I've done a documentary film. I've done Christian fiction. I've done debates. I've done apologetics. I've done all sorts of things. And so I also sometimes go into satire. And most people are just used to someone doing one thing. So just understand on this channel, we do a little bit of everything. It's mostly history and apologetics, but sometimes we do satire. And so I want you to be aware, the following is bad marriage advice. Don't follow bad advice, all right? It is presented for amusement's sake. It is a satire. It's tongue-in-cheek. Don't be weird about it, all right? Get advice from someone with a good marriage or someone who is making a bad one work, right? Don't take bad marriage advice and apply it to your life. That's not the point here. The point of us to have ha-has, right? It is theological ha-ha, I suppose, because you could have every narrow type of entertainment on YouTube. Now, the theme of this bad marriage advice is that neither gender should be a doormat, right? I see this a lot in the manosphere and in the antithesis to the manosphere. And it seems like everyone needs to be a doormat. And so what kind of is behind all the humor is no one should be a doormat, right? That's the theme. It's a response to predatory advice given by the manosphere and gender ideologues. So if anything during this sounds even remotely good, consult your own spiritual father, right? I'm not your marriage guru, and that's not the point of this. It's just for fun, okay? So be normal. And like I said, we want your bad advice. So give us your bad marriage advice as well. Let's get started with bad marriage advice. Golden Rule Plus, all right? We got to learn to apply Golden Rule Plus to our marriages, okay? What is that? Well, let's start with the kind of golden rules, right? So there's the negative golden rule. The wife yells at you, don't yell back. He yells at you, don't yell back, all right? It's like not doing evil, even though people do evil unto you. So that's good. I'm saying not to follow that, but that's the negative golden rule. We're trying to learn about the positive, the golden rule plus. Then there's the positive golden rule, the normal golden rule, right? Responding kindly. Someone yells at you, but I don't want to be yelled at. I want to be treated kindly. That's what I want. Do unto others as I want done unto me, right? So the response to someone yelling at me is to treat them back kindly. That's the golden rule. But now we got to go a step above the golden rule plus. What is the golden rule plus? Okay. Golden Rule Plus is responding in the manner the yelling person wants, not what you want. I don't want to be yelled at. I want to be treated kindly. But that's what you want. Golden Rule Plus is to respond in the manner that the yelling person wants to diffuse the situation, again, within reason, right? So it might be yelling back. It might be telling a joke. I don't know what it might be, but it would be what that person wants to diffuse the situation. So the correct response is not what you want. Do unto others as you want done unto you. The correct response is to do what they want. All right. It's this spiritual teaching beyond, right? That's the joke here. So what we see, it's kind of like the Oracle in the Matrix. In the movie The Matrix, the Oracle tells you the future, but not quite. The Oracle tells you what you need to hear so the future turns out the way it ought to, right? And so in the same way, it's telling a person what they need to hear to be happy. And this has been explained to me once, actually, that, you might give someone pizza because you go, I like pizza. But if the other person doesn't like pizza, did you really follow the golden rule? The Pharisee will say, of course I did, because I did unto others as I want. I like pizza, so I gave them pizza. But we want to fulfill the golden rule in the spirit of the law, not in the letter of the law. And the spirit of the law is to respond as that person really wants. And sometimes that can look a little zany. So that is the golden rule plus. Now next, bad marriage advice. You need to identify the frozen peas. What is frozen peas? Years ago, my mother was going to the supermarket with her family when she was a kid. So this was like back in the Stone Age, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And this old couple was arguing over the frozen peas. I don't want to return the frozen peas. I want canned peas, blah, blah, blah. So my mother turned to my grandfather and asked him, why are they arguing about frozen peas? And he looked at her and said, the argument's not about frozen peas. So obviously there's irony here. They are literally arguing about frozen peas, but the argument's not actually about frozen peas. So what is the lesson? We have to identify the frozen peas. What's the argument really about? What the person's saying, what they're saying they're concerned about, or something else? And so we don't argue back about frozen peas. We got to stop conflict resolution and start conflict dissolution. I'll repeat. Stop conflict resolution and start conflict dissolution. We want to prevent the conflict or make it come apart, not resolve it, right? How do you resolve an argument over frozen peas? It's stupid to begin with, right? So you can't resolve a stupid argument, but you could try to dissolve and make go away a stupid argument so that you're not arguing over something stupid. Because useless fights are proxies in a wider conflict, right? We want dissolution of useless fights so that there is a less and mitigated wider conflict, because the idea in marriage is not to have this wider conflict, correct? So one thing we have to keep in mind is people want firm boundaries. So a lot of dissolving a conflict is having boundaries. And so part of this is, I'm not fighting about this frozen peas. This is ridiculous, right? You have to put the boundary here. I'm not having this argument right now. Because if you don't show that boundary, it connotes weakness. And then people are predatory with weakness. It's something from sin that proceeds from the fall. And so then the argument continues over increasingly useless and weird things, sometimes totally made up stuff. Men are bad at picking useless fights, by the way. All right. So women often see this as it's sort of beta behavior, and women don't want beta husbands. And so when men don't pick useless fights, they see that, oh, this man's weak, so I have to pick useless fights to see how strong he is, because I want a strong husband. But for the gals out there watching this show, because we're going to be ragging on both men and the women. All right, for the gals watching this, just so you know, men who don't pick useless fights aren't beta. All right, they're not betas. Don't think that he's weak. It's not considered masculine behavior. Like, men generally don't do this one. It doesn't mean they don't do it, but the men that even do are pretty much effeminate. And so you have to see this. If a man doesn't do it, it's not because he's weak necessarily. He may be, but he's not effeminate, right? And if your husband is picking useless fights, nitpicky about all sorts of things, like he's OCD and the doilies have to be a certain way, of course that's effeminate, right? So don't confuse that as him like, oh, he's an alpha because he picks all this useless fights with me. It's actually kind of the opposite. It's pretty effeminate behavior. All right. So that being said, here are some conflict dissolution strategies. All right. This is bad marriage advice. So here's some bad marriage conflict dissolution strategies. There's what I call the Niedermeyer, right? The Niedermeyer is when you pretend you didn't hear someone, even they're looking you right in the face, you know exactly what they said, right? It's frozen peas. I'm mad at these frozen peas. What did you say? Right? You just don't go into it. And it's so insulting to do the Niedermeyer. Just like, I didn't hear you. And they say it louder. What? They just give up. And it leads to the dissolution of the useless argument. So that's the point of the Niedermeyer. Now, here's another conflict dissolution strategy. Don't say no, right? What do you mean no, right? No. You don't say no. You say yes. Yeah, I'll do it. No problem. I'm going to do it later, right? Later never happens, right? But to stop the frozen peas conflict, you say yes, right? So that way the person doesn't feel you're pushing against them, but you do it later. You establish that boundary. And by never doing it, people get the clue because pride becomes on the line, right? If you say, no, it's a matter of pride, I have to get my way. But if you give them their way, but then give them time to calm down because you said you do it later, now they realize there was a boundary established. So there you go. That's another dissolution strategy. We have this. I changed my mind. Well, what if someone calls you out for saying, I'll do it later? You never did. You always say you do it later. Go, no, you first to say, no, of course I always will do it later. I always do it. I don't know what you're talking about. But the other is they really call you out and it's, well, I changed my mind. Right. And so you go, I changed my mind. It's like, well, you don't change your mind. You just change the topic. And so there is the ace of the hole to get out of it. I changed my mind. And then I think people need to avoid saying dangerous things outrageous things during these arguments. Shouldn't be saying anything crazy. Don't let your passions get the best of you. But God forbid it does. All right. What do you say? If you screw up, you say, only a loon would think I was serious when I said that. Right? You dismiss it. It's crazy to think that was serious. I said that about your mother. You know, I didn't really mean that. I didn't think you thought you'd take that serious. No one would take that serious, right? So again, it's all about the dissolution of the conflict, right? Not like let's actually fix this frozen pea situation. It's not worth fixing. Actually trying to fix it makes it a problem. And that's the point in conflict dissolution. Now, guys, and I'm sure the girls are chuckling right now, women are already, they're more than capable of doing this. They default to this. They're not even gonna think they're doing the stuff that they do it all the time. All right. So women already default to this. So guys, you're going to have to kind of learn to do this to speak the love language of your wife. All right. So there you go. Conflict dissolution. Now, leverage. Believe it or not, my confessor is actually totally flat out. You need leverage, but I am not my confessor. I'll be giving bad marriage advice, right? So let's talk a little about leverage within the bad marriage advice context. Due to the fall, necessity motivates, but not values, right? It takes conscious effort to take your religious beliefs and have those inform your decision making, but it takes no effort at all to be motivated by necessity. And sadly, deprivation and death is what motivates all of us, right? I'm hungry, I need this, I need that. It motivates everything, not values. It takes effort to be motivated by values, and people don't put effort into everything all the time. And so what's this lead to? Sadly, people are only as faithful as their options. That's a default. Now, as Christians, they could overcome this, at least consciously, but not the concupiscence of it, right? Not the eternal motivation that's bad that they have to consciously reject, right? And so only through consciously rejecting it over time, it becomes habitual to reject it. Now, because we don't know what's habitual for other people, we have to be the person's best option, right? If someone's instinct is to only be as faithful as their options, to help them along the way, it's not to say, well, you should overcome your bad instinct. How far are you going to get with that, right? It's easier to be the best option, and that helps that person along who is struggling with that bad internal motivation. All right. So leverage can be used to align necessities of values. And again, the household have to be more conscientious about this. Doesn't mean wives can't do it, but the husbands can be more conscientious that he needs to use leverage to align necessities with values, right? All right, well, I have to use leverage so that way what is valuable and spiritual is what actually is the easier thing to choose. So what might this look like in bad marriage, right? So for the wife, traditionally, they'd be the one to balance the checkbook, right? The man brings home the bacon, the woman cooks the bacon. Even if you're working too, doesn't mean you can't take the active role in paying the taxes and making sure the private school tuition's paid for paying the credit card bills, all that stuff, because that gives you leverage. You actually know where the money's going, right? And so you could use that to kind of align your husband. Why are we spending that money at Applebee's on Friday night, right? And you came home late. That gives you leverage. And so once you take over the checkbook responsibilities, it gives a lot of leverage to rein in the guy, right? And that's about leverage, which then takes necessity and aligns it with value. So that's a good example of that. Meals, right? You cook a good meal, it gives him something to come home for. He needs to eat. He wants good food. Even if it's cooked and it's just left in the microwave, he knows comes home, there's some food there. You don't want to take the chance there isn't food. And so, yes, it sounds traditional, but you're aligning necessity with values. Give them a reason. What's the value? It's good to be home. It's good to have a family meal. Well, it's good to have family together. It's good to have family rely on one another. Well, how do you necessitate those values and necessity? Make sure there's food and it's worth eating, right? Very obvious. Cleaning, right? Make the house worth coming home for, right? So cleaning, having things nice, having things cute. Those are necessity with values. Kids, taking care of the kids. Who's going to take care of all this stuff for the kids, figure out all the stuff the kids at school? Well, if you do that, you're aligning necessity with values. Now, none of these things are panaceas, obviously. All sorts of people do this stuff and have awful husbands, but these are at least steps that you could do, according to bad marriage advice, at least. Well, how bad for husbands? Prenup, right? She can't just leave you if she's not going to get anything, right? So that helps the stability of marriage. Or you own a company, before you're married. So when you get married, you have a prenup, the company's mine, premarital asset, and then whatever savings you don't put in the bank account that's a postmarital asset, you keep it in the business. Oh, I'm investing in the business, this or that. It adds a lot of leverage, right? Half of nothing's nothing of the postmarital asset, right? So you could create familial stability by creating financial leverage. And that's an example of that. Also the checkbook, the man could do the same thing by taking over all the finances. So same thing as we already discussed for the wife taking over the checkbook. Then there's also the car, home repairs. Who's going to do all this stuff? So if you just sit around on Discord all day, you're not really adding much to the table as far as taking care of the wife's necessities. But if you're always taking care of everything in the house, the car, all the things she needs, now all of a sudden she at least needs you a little bit, and you're aligning necessity of values because we want to depend on one another, right? That's the point. But if you're not taking care of someone's necessities, you are not doing that. So remind the other person is the lesson that you are needed. That is the point. So here we go. Here's another one. It's from Father Moses. Don't enter into the time machine. Okay? Don't enter into the time machine. This happens all the time in relationships. And so bad marriage advice says, don't enter to the time machine. Avoid saying what could have been, what will be, thinking about it. Not going to help you. Don't imagine, for example, I should have married a doctor. I know guys have been told by their wives, I should have married a doctor. Or the scumbag guy that would say, I should have married your friends. Like this crazy things that are out there. Don't enter the time machine. Imagine would have been better with this other person. It's not going to help you. It doesn't help the other person. It's extremely insulting, right? Don't resent, I ceded my youth to this person. I could have had such better time with this person for all these years, right? Again, this time machine. Don't get into the past. You live in the present, right? I would have had a better career if I didn't settle down with her and we had kids. We stayed there for this. Don't get into the time machine. You live in the present. That already happened. Don't get into the time machine, right? All right. And now we also need to stop. Remember when you, no. Don't get into remember when you, because that's getting to the past. That's the time machine. All right. Because for one, the man never remembers. So the moment you think, gals, that you're fixing, well, I'll remind him now, fix it. No, he don't remember. So don't even bother. He doesn't remember. All right. And memory, gals, invents details, right? So you think you remembered it went down that way, but it kind of didn't. And for the reasons thought it went down, but reality, no, it did not. Right? So it's good just to avoid getting to that time machine. The scriptures say love does not keep account of wrongs. So don't go into the past looking for, this happened, that happened, don't do that, right? Bad marriage advice. Now, women, don't listen to your girlfriends, All right. Good advice for you. Don't listen to your girlfriends out there. They're giving you bad advice. It's an instinct. They're all trying to take your husband from you. Even if they're not consciously thinking about it, back the head somewhere, right? We're talking about the craziness from the fall, not what people consciously should be doing or even really are thinking about, but what's in the reptilian part of the brain operating in the background. Okay. And so that's why your girlfriends tell you, oh, you look good with short hair. Of course you don't look good with short hair. They're telling you that so you look more ugly, right? So you have to identify from your friends, gals, what is the you look good with short hair advice, right? Because it's not good advice. It's advice meant to sabotage you, whether consciously or subconsciously. So you have to identify the short hair advice. Here's some of it. If he loved you, he'd just know. No, that's nonsense, right? We don't operate that way. Men especially don't read minds and they don't think they do. All right. Or he should make you happy. Right? Your happiness comes from yourself. So that's already bad advice. That's sad. You're putting the onus on someone else to make you happy. And you can do that. All right. You're not a floor mat. Or of course we're not a floor mat. So the moment that you put that advice out there, you're making something adversarial. That person's not trying to help you resolve your situation. They're actually trying to make it worse. Right? So you got to identify the short hair advice. All right. Advice should focus on how to fulfill Christian duties. That's how you know it's good advice. The person is giving you advice that's in the scriptures. It's good advice, right? So here's another piece of bad marriage advice. Don't dwell on the process. Appreciate the results. Again, don't dwell on the process. Appreciate the results. Don't be mad it's not done your way. As long as it ends up okay, you should be happy, right? As long as the job gets done, that's all that matters. All right. Evaluate your spouse's actions on its results, not its methods. All right. This is very important because it's part of conflict dissolution. It's important. Childcare, you might have different philosophies. All right. Well, as long as Papa's with them and stuff gets done, doesn't matter. It was done in a different order. Right. You know, it's important with career. Right. You might not think your wife should have X, Y, Z job, but she's fulfilling all her duties at home. You know, appreciate the results. Don't worry about the process so much, right? With big decisions where there's disagreement, you might go, well, if we don't want to do it this way, right? But if the disagreement is resolved by looking at, well, how is this, what are the results of doing it this way? We'll find out we'll have less arguments. And the goal is less arguments. All right. So here's a really funny one. Stephen mode versus Samson mode. All right. You need to know when to be like Saint Stephen, and you need to know when to be like Saint Samson's, because sometimes you have to be willing to be stoned to death. Right. I'm going down with the ship. I'm going to crucify my desires. It doesn't matter. Right. I'm going to be like Saint Stephen. I'm going to let you kill me, even metaphorically. Right. But other times you're going to have to tear it all down. Oh, if you do this, forget it. I'm going all nuclear on you. Right. And so we see this in the saints. Sometimes the saints act like Stephen, and sometimes they act like Samson. All right. So what are these modes for? Well, Stephen mode's for the frozen peas, right? We're not going to get all big. She's mad about the frozen peas. All right. You're right about the peas, right? You don't go Samson over the frozen peas. That's stupid. Samson mode is for existential crises, right? Like you got no choice. So, I know someone who says, listen, if you divorce me, you get the kids, you get everything. I don't care. We lose the house. I'm going to live on. Your life's going to be terrible. Now, of course, the point of saying that is not to get divorced. The person saying that, to put the person in their place, to know that if they're going to do this, they're not going to be the martyr anymore. You better think twice. And I know Christians, that have done this. I'll just leave it at that. Orthodox Christians. That being said, it also can be used for establishing important boundaries, right? I'm not going to take being yelled at. I'm going to go crazy about it or whatever like that in order to create some sort of stability in the household. So you could create boundaries by going all Samson mode. But again, it can't be over frozen peas. So what is the drawback of Samson mode? It creates what I call nuclear survivors, right? So if you go Samson mode over something stupid or something that in the end of the day doesn't hurt your marriage, right? Something that just hurts your pride. What's going to happen to the person you went to Samson mode against and things continue on? It's like someone who survived a nuclear bomb hit. Do you think they care about being hit by another nuclear bomb at that time? They've seen death, right? They're just going to keep moving forward. And so then you've lost that card to play Samson mode, right? So you don't want to overuse Samson mode because then the other person has no incentive to respond to what you care about, right? Which is the point of being dissatisfied and going Samson mode. Is you want the person to care and change. So if you overuse it, they're just going to stop changing because they're dead inside at that point. You just hit them too many times. So that happens in marriages. They become nuclear survivors, and you don't want your spouse to be a nuclear survivor because they're going to be totally unresponsive to you. All right. So let's talk about inadvertent boundaries. I think they're the funniest boundaries. Consciously setting boundaries is both manipulative and lame. You don't want to be manipulative in your marriage. You don't want to be lame. All right. So how do you inadvertently establish boundaries? Well, you have your own activities and you don't compromise, right? It's like, this is my thing. I always do this on Thursday nights. I'm not going to change this. I always do this. You have these inadvertent boundaries. So you speak stereotypes. The man on the recliner watching the game, right? Hey, shh. Aaron Judge up the bat. Wait till Aaron Judge, right? You're establishing a boundary that you got to have your time, right? So that's why guys do it, even subconsciously, is they're establishing a boundary, right? And women do this too, right? When a man knows not to interrupt the woman when she's in the middle of doing her hair for an hour. She's having me time, all right? And so that boundary is like, listen, I'm having me time. It's an inadvertent boundary. So don't get in the middle of her doing her hair or nails. Again, it could be different for your relationship and your gender. The point is, have these inadvertent boundaries, right? Don't make deals, right? Deals are lame. They signal a lack of boundary. If you go, oh, I really need you to do this, so, or don't do this because I don't like it, you don't get into that. You just burden them with it, right? So just like the guy said, listen, I always do this Thursday nights, or I always do my hair. You got to wait till I'm done, right? You become unyielding in your boundary. The other thing is to burden them. And so the boundary is you got to take care of the kids sometimes. You go, listen, Saturday mornings, you always bring the kids to the Y. Always bring the kids to the Y. I don't do it. I do the housework. And so you don't like work it out. You go, listen, you do it. I'm not doing it. Oh, I feel sick this morning. I guess he's not going. Right? Like you have to just burden them with it. It sounds crazy, but again, this is bad marriage advice. It's having fun with the crazy. So establish those boundaries inadvertently, make sure people have their roles and don't try to like make deals. Your job. You just go, oh, this is yours. I don't do that. I don't know how to do this. We'll get more into it. Inadvertent boundaries. Now, child rearing is for everyone, right? Husbands should set goals and roles, but they also need to be plain managers, right? A husband's got to be doing something with the kids or ain't going to get done. The reality is kids were free range back then. You think the 50s housewife was like this slave working away at home? No way. She's getting her hair done. She was filing her nails. She was on phone calls. Kids were outside in the wood playing cowboys and Indians, finding arrowheads, right? Came back when the lights came on. I don't even know if the Zoomers even know that's how way things used to be done, right? Kids were, as long as you're home for dinner when the street lights come on. That was the old saying, right? That's why the news used to say, it's 11 o'clock. Are your kids home yet? Like, really? People have to be reminded kids got to be home by 11 o'clock, right? That's the sort of stuff the news would say because people free range their kids. So obviously in a patriarchal society where the woman has all the child rearing responsibilities, don't think everything gets done because it wasn't getting done then, ain't going to get done now, right? So, man, you guys have to have a role if you want your kid to have some sort of child rearing now. And in modernity, free ranging don't work because a kid ain't grown up to be a random farmer, right? So you need to be a little more hands-on in the modern day. That being said, don't do too much or she will make you do everything when it comes to child rearing and resent you for it. Right? So you got to let her be a mother. They get positive feedback from having one-to-one time with their kids. Now, men are sometimes go-getters. So like they could do everything in the household. Right? If they're not the guy, I don't do anything at home. They're the new school, millennial sort of husband. They'll do everything in the home, but you don't want to do everything because it's not spiritually good for the wife. So they'll make you do everything because they'll just default to that. All right, you watch kid doing this, you clean this, you cook that. And then you go, wait a second, then what are you doing? They won't do anything. And I see this, by the way, with households with stay-at-home wives. So this occurs even with stay-at-home wives. Don't think she stays at home that this won't occur. This is why you have to not do too much. You're the manager. You have to Managers know not to do everything their employees do, right? They could get their hands dirty, but they need to get their hands dirty on the more specialized stuff because they are the manager and they have to choose the roles, whether by circumstance or actually saying you should do XYZ to better manage their employees. And the household is very analogous to this. All right. So child rearing for everyone. Now, gals out there, compete with other women through your children. That's what they did back then, right? When it was stay-at-home wives, how did you have increased esteem in the community that your kids weren't derelicts, right? So they would care if their kids did well at school. They would care if their kids were well behaved, that their kids were neat, wearing decent clothes, because it reflected upon them. And it's positive because this is how women operated for entirety of history. So it's just plain genetics from natural selection. You're going to get feedback and feel better this way if you compete and win through your own kids. Again, not to the point of being OCD, but it's good to want your kids to do better and want them to do better than other people because you will feel better and it helps your family. It's like taking one of those things that could be bad, but reorienting it towards good. Now, have a sense of shame, right? If your kids screw up, you should actually feel bad about it. We need a healthy sense of shame. And you need high expectations, right? You shouldn't expect, oh, my kid will never amount to anything because guess what? They're going to meet that expectation. So have high expectations. You want your kids to behave. You expect they behave. You know, you want your kids to be neat. You want your kids to put your stuff away. You want your kids to do their homework, whatever. You need to have those high expectations. Now, this is more a problem these days because the way of the world is for everyone to embrace their weakness and pretend that people will accept you for it, which is not true. People always prey on the weak. So don't speak publicly or proudly about my special needs child or whatever, right? Don't let your family be weak and don't speak that way to your kid. You want them to have high expectations for themselves. Of course, within reason, within what they could actually achieve, right? Not Tiger Mom stuff with Amy Chua, where she was torturing the kids, but within reason. So are there exceptions? Of course. I'm not talking about the exceptions. And like I said, none of this is meant to be serious. This is bad marriage advice. All right. So anyway, we're going to keep going. Let's talk about the fact that men seek conquest. It's true. Men have this kind of linear motivation. They want better, 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 and better until they hit a wall and they can't get better anymore and they give up. And so there's obvious negative ways it could go. They could just be obsessed with their career. They could be obsessed with winning the big game. They could be obsessed with, God forbid, but it's true, better and better looking women. Men do this stuff because it's sort of that competitive motivation they have. They want better and better and better, but men do hit a wall. And when they hit a wall, they will settle. This is as good as I'm going to be with this. Okay. And they'll generally emotionally cope unless they're crazy. So this sort of scheme of conquest is in its linear direction means that men are very predictable in their motivations. You know, they always want more and they always know when they hit the wall that they'll kind of stick there. And so that shows a sort of stability. And this could be manipulable for good, right? So the wife could be supportive of her husband furthering his career by saying, you could get that job. You could get that promotion. If, you know, we move to this community, we could do better. If the kids go here, they could do better. And so this sort of way of encouraging the husband, knowing he's motivated by conquest, could encourage him towards better, right? We want to motivate the spouse towards better. Right? So this could be manipulable for good because we must redirect fallen inclinations for good. Now, this whole conquest mentality comes from the fall. It comes from deprivation where there's not enough. There's a scarcity of resources. There is death. There's these things we have to deal with that are from the fall. So it's not a good motivation, right? So it's consciously seeing what God has permitted to exist after the fall and reorienting it towards good, as St. Maximus talks about with the blameless passions. Now, women have a different motivation. It's not that conqueror mentality, right? Women seek physical, material, and we're going to talk about first emotional security, and in that order. They want physical security first, then material, then emotional. All right? So men are conquest-oriented. Women are security-oriented. All right? So the man has to think about what kind of security he provides the woman. And the worst kind to emphasize doesn't mean to give. We want to give everything, right? We want to give everything we could give. But the worst investment is definitely emotional security by far. It's too subjective, right? You invest in, I want you to feel good. Oh, that doesn't make me feel good. We're going to talk about why, because she's lacking in the other security departments. She'll feel better emotionally if she feels secure elsewhere. Because emotional security comes from circumstances and oneself. It's really out of your control, right? You can't make someone feel emotionally secure because only they could make their own emotional security, right? You could avoid abusing them, right? And giving people complexes, but otherwise, not too much you could do in the emotional security department. Doesn't mean neglect it, but it's not the most important place of investment. Now let's talk about women and material security. This is something the manosphere lies to you about, right? They try to make it like hypergamy is this thing, and women always want richer men. And so as long as you have enough money, you'll have a woman by your side. Well, it's not going to be a very good woman, by the way, and she's still going to go behind your back with the pool guy with muscles, right? And we'll talk about that in a second. So hypergamy is a myth because material security, for one, is not fully in your control, right? So you can't always get that promotion. You can work hard, and sometimes only so far you're going to get. So to emphasize this as an end of itself when it's not terribly in your control, it's kind of a bad use of resources. So yeah, you get the promotion, do it. Doesn't mean you should work hard, but you have to realize this isn't your best in your relationship investment, right? Because it's not the easiest way to provide your wife's security. It also decreases leverage with modern law, right? The more money you have, it's more money there where she could divorce you, take half of it, take half of a bigger house, and just upgrade you with a better guy and then wait to see where that goes with him, right? So this idea that you could provide material security as that will create stability is really not true, because it actually creates a leverage in the wife's hands, right? Because now you got a lot to lose and you got to carry her, if you do X, Y, Z and walk on eggshells, which then connotes weakness. People don't like weakness. They prey on the weak and the relationship starts to dissolve, right? Talk about bad marriages here, right? So women with bigger salaries than the men, that also creates resentment, right? Because women want material security. You don't get a lot of material security when the man makes less money than you, but it also creates leverage. The woman doesn't want to lose half her money. They might think about it a little less than the man because they're not conquest oriented. But it starts creating, in this modern day age where women do make more money than men in white collar families most of the time, other than the very, very rich, it now starts creating leverage for the upper middle class men because their wives make more money. So it creates a stable situation in some respects, unless she can upgrade you with the upper management at the office because they make way more money than her. But it makes everyone miserable, right? It creates leverage, but because she's not feeling that material security, it makes her miserable. So take it for what it's worth. You got stability, but you got someone miserable there. But like I said, she needs that big upgrade to leave because of that leverage. But I think physical security is the easiest way a man can provide security in a relationship. And it's also the one women seek the most. All right. So use danger to your advantage. And we're saying this again, these are all jokes. So what do we mean by that? Right? Women and physical security, right? How do we use danger to our advantage so a woman knows she's got physical security and she feels stable and happy in the relationship? Well, women don't like jerks, right? For some reason, they always gravitate towards jerks. Why is that? They're seeking physical security because jerks tend to be tough guys, right? And tough guys provide physical security. So women don't really want the jerk. They want the tough guy. So if you're a tough guy that's not a jerk, even better. But physical security is so important. Even being a jerk will be tolerable because of the physical security that jerk provides. So guys, you got to learn to embrace danger a little bit. All right. So when we talk about this, women, how do we help your husband be the sort of guy that provides you the physical security you so crave? Well, gas him up, right? Oh, you're so strong, or could you take care of this? Could you smash that bug? All that stuff. Gas him up when he's providing you the physical security. So that way you feel better because he will do it more. He gets the positive reinforcement in the very category that you're looking for him to do more for you in, right? He fixes something on the roof because it's dangerous. Be very grateful for it. And guess what? He's going to do more dangerous jobs for you and you're going to feel even better. It sounds crazy and shallow, but the eternal reptilian motivations are crazy and shallow. And we need to be mindful of them. All right. How about you guys? What are the things you could do for your wives in this category that are not insane? Go somewhere you can parallel park, right? Have dinner at that cool, trendy restaurant in the city. There's no parking. There's street parking. You got to parallel park. Go for an evening walk after the restaurant. All of a sudden, you're going to find why she's so happy. It isn't the food. It's because the fact that neighborhood, it's not super sketchy. It's not like you brought her to back then it was called the rave, but the nightclub where there's gunshots. Though honestly, in a weird way, women do like that because, again, the whole physical security aspect. But here in Orthodox Christian theology, we don't make those recommendations. So go to the trendy restaurant that you need to parallel park and go for the evening walk. And that's going to gas her up because now she's reminded, oh, yeah, I can't do this alone because that would be crazy. And reminds her that you're providing physical security. It's the reminder she needs. All right. I know a guy who actually was taking his fiance to the firing range. It's not a crazy idea. Shows her, yeah, I know how to handle a gun. Now, the idea is not to be threatening. She could see, he could protect me. Right? It's loud and scary. He's not scared of it. And he could hit that target. I know guys hit the gym, do boxing classes. Women dig this because it appeals to their desire for physical security, and it's more in control than how much money you can make, right? If you put that extra 2 hours a day in the office, you might not even get promoted. You might get taken advantage of. But you put that extra 2 hours a day in the weight room and boxing class at the local gym, you're going to get ROI on that. You're definitely going to get ROI in that. And married men should do it because it makes their wives happy. And it's in your control. So again, think of physical security. Now, about security. I want to tell you something, guys. Don't think women will just love you by default. If you cannot provide any security, you're some twerp and you're not going to do any of these things, don't get married. Because you can't provide what the woman needs. You have too many problems if you can't provide any of these kinds of security. And I want to remind gals who are watching this, equip the one you are with to better provide security. Help him get that better job. Don't always castigate him when he's trying to say kind things to you, or he's going to stop saying kind things to you. Gas him up when he's providing that physical security. And guess what? You'll get more of it. All right? So give the guy you're with that positive reinforcement and don't look elsewhere for those forms of security. The moment you think it's elsewhere, you're already cheating in your mind. Right? Even if you're not thinking of, sex or relationship. The moment you think, oh, I'm not getting enough security here because, all these other spouses have more security with theirs, that's actually kind of cheating. That's the first step because you're looking for security elsewhere. Equip the one you're with to provide that security. Don't look at getting that security elsewhere. All right. And we got a big problem today. All right. We're going to do this comment in a second. We got a very big problem today. The government is replacing men. Right? The police is what provide physical security, at least the specter of it, right? Some guy's killing you in the house, good. The police will respond to you being dead. So don't think, right, you're really getting, the police is really protecting you. Or, for example, oh, well, if I get injured, I don't need a husband because I could get workman's comp, or I don't need a husband because then I could get food stamps and this stuff. The government replaces men in these forms of security, and that actually decreases the stability of relationships in the societies with more societal interventions in these forms of security. So the government is replacing men in these categories. And this is why we see in the West relationships dissolving because sadly, I'm not saying it's the way it should be, due to the fall, people seek value in another person because the security they provide, particularly women, because again, men are very linearly motivated over conquest. Women seek security. So in Western societies, where women get some level of security from the government, this makes men a little less important, and that leads to relationships being less stable. So we have this very crucial info. Where can I buy your ebook? I don't have one on this topic. This is a joke stream. I don't think I'll write a whole book on this, at least not for a few decades anyway. So there you go. Guys, we want your bad advice. Give me your bad advice in funny comments. All right, it'll be more fun. Now, be happy or grateful, get more stuff. So remember this, gals and guys. Be grateful, be happy, you'll get more stuff, right? Fake it if you're not feeling it. Because if like some guy does something for you and, you don't like the thing that he bought, do you think he's going to be thoughtful again if you poo-poo it? Of course not, right? Or guys, she cooked the meal, didn't come out right. If you don't act grateful, you think she's going to put as much effort next time that meal? Of course not. All right. So we got this funny bad advice coming up Please, guitar God, we want that funny bad advice. All right. So fake it if you're not feeling it, because at least show gratitude and you'll get stuff, right? We want more from the person. And as Christ says, it's more blessed to give than to receive. So if we give, we actually get more blessings. So let the person get positive reinforcement to do what God wants them to do, to give more, right? So women, all right, is he going to want to upgrade the kitchen or be more sensitive, right? If you always nag him, or, he doesn't get positive reinforcement things he's doing? No, because like she's always unhappy with me anyway. So why am I going to improve the kitchen? She'll be unhappy anyway, right? So you're more likely to get stuff if he thinks you got his back and you're happy with what he's doing. Same thing, men. Is she going to cook a good meal or care about your birthday without positive feedback? No, right? She made a cake you didn't like that much. She gained that cake next year. No way, right? So if you make it a can't win situation for the person, they're going to stop trying. And that means you lose too. So be happy or grateful, get more stuff. All right. So we got some bad advice here. Submit to your wife in all things. There you go. Thank you, Joseph. We got make sure your wife always pays on the dates that you take her on. That will give her material security, right? That she's paying for everything. Crying over a stub toe will make your wife love you more. It shows your sensitive side, right? Does that show physical security that you can't take a hit? Of course not, right? Of course not. All right, the Erwin Rommel. And guys, keep the bad advice coming. What's the Erwin Rommel? Well, what Erwin Rommel used to do during World War II, they always attacked around the flank and then got you from behind. And he just kept doing the same thing because it kept working until finally, like, Bernard Montgomery, the British general, realized that this Nazi general Rommel just kept doing the same thing. So what did he do? He put his reserves on his flank, and then Rommel got caught with his pants down, right? So what's our lesson with the Erwin Rommel? Keep doing the same thing until it stops working. Don't reinvent the wheel. Do what works and keeps doing it, even if it's obvious, right? If bringing up X always starts a fight, and saying Y always ends it, keep doing Y, never do X. It's not complicated, right? Even if like it has nothing to do with the argument, right? So if you argue about X and you respond to it, your mother-in-law left a filthy house and you're getting this from your mother, and for some reason that just stops things, then just do that, even though it's nuts. Just Erwin Rommel. So one day she realizes he's just saying the same nut thing each time, and that's what's stopping everything. I don't want to lose the argument because he keeps pulling a Rommel on me. So there you go. Erwin Rommel. Humans update software rarely, and that's why it works. Like, you can even tell them this is what's coming, and they can't respond to it. They freeze up because their software doesn't get the firmware update. All right? So remember that. Humans update software rarely. Now, how do you know what Rommel to pick? Here's a word of advice for you, gals and gents. Identify your spouse's tactic. Everyone's got a tactic, right? So like guys saying, I'm doing something really important. So if you're a chick and you go, he's trying to get you to do something, you got to establish a boundary. You go, I'm still doing something really important. It works for him. So all of a sudden he's going to stop. Because whatever someone does is telegraphing you what their tactic is. Because people always do their own tactics. So you know their Rommel by what they do. So then you do what they do and you use it against them to establish the boundaries. Again, not to be malicious. It's to establish the boundaries that relationships need. So identify the spouse's tactic, employ it, and avoid being called out for it, right? So the person's like, wait a second, you're just doing it because that's what I do. And you go, what? Pretend you didn't hear it. You pull the Niedermeyer. All right, we got another crazy advice. Insist that your bad driving life drives the big truck that she's uncomfortable with driving. It's not like your lives are at stake or anything. I like eating steak. Send your wife down when you hear a bump in the night. She'll be all right. Oh yeah, she'll really get physical security. That feeling of physical security if she's going downstairs. Funny thing is, there's a bump in the night. I always play up, oh, that could be someone, and then I go downstairs because they want to have that feeling of security. So that's the thing. My wife's very sensitive. She grew up in a third world country, for example. And she said she got no sleep growing up because she was constantly afraid of people breaking in. And so, oh yeah, I play up going down and making sure there's nothing bad happening. There's a bump in the night. So there you go. Even better if you go downstairs to the baseball bat or whatever else to take it really serious. I don't do that, but that's something you can do. Here's some more bad marriage advice. Embrace rather your role or your part. Right? Everyone's got a role or a part in a relationship, and you should embrace it. All right. Expectations are established early in a relationship, and you should embrace what the other person expects from you. All right. If your expectations change, right, you get a little older. So let's say, right, the guy doing the cool stuff at the gym, he's like, all right, we're 35 years old now. I don't really care about this 10 years later. It's kind of unfair to start imposing, like, this is not important to me anymore. Right. Because imposing a change in expectations actually creates unresolvable difficulties because these expectations are like a sort of contract, right? When you get married, whatever expectations existed in that day are kind of presumed, well, that's how it's supposed to continue going, right? So if I didn't spend Thursday nights doing whatever with you and doing something with my friends, don't think that's changing after we get married, right? Because that's going to create a conflict because I thought we all expected this. Now, of course, there's good reasons to change these things. We got stuff with kids on Thursday night, or now there's this couples Bible study or whatever, right? There's good reasons to change expectations, but you have to acknowledge that they should not be changed just because it's the right thing, because people expect them, right? And so you got to explain, this is where he expects to be or where he expects me to be. I cooked early in the relationship, so I can't just stop. Right? So you should embrace it unless there's a willing, non-compelled changing of terms. Like, yeah, I cooked all the time, but now I got the night shift at the hospital. I can't cook dinner. I'm working. Right? So embrace the role. And if it has to change, right? Because it becomes like a Samson mode thing, like you could lose your job. If it has to change, try to make it a willing changing of terms. All right. So happily play your role until there is a consensus on how the terms should change. All right. Now, here's a weird one. Public embarrassment. We shouldn't even have to talk about this, but it does exist. It does exist, and it's very gendered. This is a card that only women could play. All right. Only women could play the public embarrassment card. But it should only be used for existential crises, right? So like back then, it would be that if a guy, again, because people are horrible, they had a mistress, you take the kids out and you bring them there and you go, you're leaving your family for this home record. You embarrass him in front of his own kids. And people hear about this. And then he's a fool to the whole town. Now, we don't want to make a husband a fool to the whole town, but what was the point of this? Because if I don't do this, then this affair will never end and this family's over. And I'm trying to save my family, right? So this public embarrassment is sort of like this Trump card, but once you use it, it's like using the bomb. You've just gone full nuclear. And if you overuse it, you get nuclear survivors, and if you lost trust forever. So it's sort of like for an existential crisis, extremely serious, like life and death sort of stuff, right? And so it's not something that should be played. And men, you should never play this thing because it just makes you look like a jerk. Right. So women could pull this out for existential crisis. And honestly, man, you should never be embarrassing your wife. It just makes you look like a fool. You look better when your wife looks better in public. Right. And so there's this in bad marriage advice, the public embarrassment card. It's very gendered. So there you go. We have this. I like marital amnesia. So my bad marriage advice is avoid marital amnesia. All right. Amnesia sets in marriage due to head trauma. All right. I guess marriage is very similar, right? And so there's definitely marital amnesia. I guarantee it. Women forget how to cook and clean. It does. I've seen it. They cook and clean for you before you're married, and then all of a sudden, like, it disappears. And the funny part is, like, it's legit. Like, they really forgot. Let me tell a story at my wife's expense, a little one, because we don't want the public embarrassment. I've dated girls before I was married that like would cook and stuff, and it just wasn't that great. And my wife, when we were dating, like she cooked this stuff from scratch. It was actually good. I'm like, whoa! It's like all these stereotypes of what Asian women can supposedly do, right? Because my wife is Asian, and should cook this pork from scratch, or if you had some leftover bones. Oh, no, no, don't. I'm going to make soup out of that in like 30 minutes out of like random vegetables and bones and stuff. Boom, you had soup. And I have to tell you, we got married like 13 years ago. I'm losing count now. We get married a long time ago, right? And she legit can't do this anymore, or she's just starting to relearn it now. We go, wait a second, we learned this when we were dating. You did this when we were dating. I remember bringing that up. It's like, oh yeah, she totally forgot. It's legit. It's marital amnesia. It really happens. I don't know why. I'm not here to answer the question, but try to avoid it. Right? If you knew how to cook from scratch beforehand, you shouldn't like forget how to do it. If you know how to clean stuff beforehand and organize stuff, don't think you should forget it, gals. All right. I think sometimes gals screw up on purpose. It's a way of establishing a negative sort of boundary that actually decreases your leverage, because good cooking increases leverage in a relationship. But sort of like, if I screw up the meal, I won't have to cook as much because we'll eat out more and I want to eat out more. So it's kind of like short-term gain, but long-term loss. And so then that becomes your reality. You forgot how to cook because you kind of subtly screwed up on purpose all these times. So like, don't screw up on this purpose on purpose. Try to cook like, guests could come in and you actually care what your food tastes like, right? So don't do the screwing up on purpose. You cook less or whatever else. We have this agreeableness amnesia for the gals. Like early in a relationship, oh, I like all music. Oh, I like rock. Of course they don't, but they're just trying to be agreeable. Well, don't forget that, because that sort of agreeable attitude is conducive to long-term stability. We're not saying like, be a doormat, but you should be agreeable, right? Like you don't want a disagreeable relationship. So don't forget how to be agreeable. You know how to do it for the first 2-3 years. For 2-3 years, even if you're not feeling it, don't forget how you did it. We have gentleness amnesia. Like when women are supportive, seeing the picture, it's holding his face. Don't forget the little nice feelings about touch and things like that. Be gentle, because that does go away. You got real life problems and take people for granted, it goes away. And you can almost forget. It becomes a modus operandi not to do this. Try not to have marital amnesia, right, gals? We have gratitude amnesia, right? How to be grateful, like the little things you just be grateful for, and then later you just take them for granted. No, don't let that amnesia set in. Don't forget how to be grateful. But guys get marital amnesia too. They totally get marital amnesia. And so there's the carrying amnesia, right? The give a flip sort of amnesia. Guys will forget when her birthday is, his anniversary. They even forget the kids' ages, but they won't forget the spinning back kick combo, right? Like, so the stuff they care about, they don't forget, but they forget that the actual important stuff in a relationship. Don't let marital amnesia go and corrupt your relationship, right? Remember these things. I actually, at work, circle these dates because, right, you have to avoid the bad things that set in because of the fall. So I try to avoid it. So I actually will write on my work calendar, oh yeah, that's my anniversary. One year I actually got the day wrong, so I was convinced months before it was one day after the day it really was. I know that's bad. At least I was trying. But that's, again, male marital amnesia. We guys have to fight the marital amnesia, right? And we have the looks amnesia. Guys let themselves go because they're less looks concerned than women are. So then they gain 20 pounds and they don't care whether they're in shape and all that stuff. And don't be a floppy mess, guys. It's show that you care about your wife. All right. Don't get amnesia that, it's okay to brush your teeth and cut your hair and shave. I don't know why you wouldn't be doing that already. But guys kind of do that stuff and they get comfortable, right? They conquer. And when they hit the wall, they're all right, I'll just settle what I have. And so if you were doing these things because you thought it would help you conquer, you can't stop, even if you're going to have to settle for what you have. Then we have calmness amnesia. Guys will be calm with the little weird things and the frozen peas that their first girlfriends and then wives bring up. And then they stop being calm about it. And you got to learn, to still be calm. Don't forget, because you're calm in the beginning, don't get amnesia. Okay. Now we have this piece of bad marriage advice. All right. Don't worry. Be happy. All right. We don't have to worry about everything in life. Just try to have the don't worry, be happy attitude. So men have like these transparent sort of feelings. You kind of know how a man's feeling, if he's down in the dumps or not, right? And so there's return on investment and trying to make the guy happy. That's very simple, right? They're very transparent and it's very little easy ways. So like, again, cooking surprises. It's like a little nifty thing. You make interesting looking cupcakes. It's going to make the guy happy. It might not cure cancer, but it's like, it's an easy way. You know, if you do, make him happy. Like, you'd have to be mentally defective not to be a little happy. Something like that. Something new and cute or whatever. But here's a piece of bad marriage advice. Women are never happy. And you're never sure how they're feeling about what you're doing. All right. Men want to please. And that kind of leads to this negative feedback that women know this and they play up their dissatisfaction to get more, right? He wants to please. So if I act like this is not enough, I will get more. And within like tiny increments, this could actually work. You know, a little bit of positive feedback and a little bit negative. Oh, that was good. Just be a little better. Did this way, right? You kind of floating it out there and you'll get more. But sometimes people start believing like that sort of dissatisfied behavior to the point where guys give up, which then you don't get anything like we already talked about. We don't want them giving up. So if overplayed, men give up, and worse, you start believing it and then you're not happy. You're worrying and you're not happy. And we want to not worry and be happy. And a fun little story I have this. So I remember this trip to Montreal. When my mother-in-law moved to the West, she never went to Montreal before, of course. I remember bringing her there because, you know, my wife and I went there a few times. I figured it'd be a fun family trip. Bring my mother-in-law with us to Montreal. And I remember driving back and go, oh, did he like it? You know, it's okay. It was what was translated because she don't speak English. So I said, very matter-of-factly, I was like, okay, we don't have to go again. All of a sudden her eyes, I can see her eyes opened up. Blah, 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 blah. You said, in Khmer. And I was like, oh, no, I want to go again, right? So you don't want to be dissatisfied because the guy's, all right, we're not going to do it, right? Don't do that because people kind of default like, it's okay. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. All right, so now let's do some bad marriage silver bullets. All right, bad marriage silver bullets. We got this. Go to bed angry. You always hear, don't go to bed angry. No. That's the wrong advice. Here's the bad marriage advice. Go to bed angry. Right? Don't try to resolve that conflict. And by going to bed angry, you kind of don't let the frozen peas make it where you got to be angry all night resolving frozen peas. So just go to bed angry. Doesn't get resolved. Move on in life. Be an adult. Here's another silver bullet. Anything important waits until the kids are asleep. Sadly, this happens. I don't know why, but people want to argue in front of the kids. Kids don't like it. I think you're sick in the head if you want to argue in front of the kids. But for some flaming reason, people want to argue in front of the kids. So here's a piece of bad marriage advice. You go, listen, your concerns are very valid, but we got to do it later, right? When the kids are asleep. What happens? You start realizing this stuff that had to be resolved, that had to be yelled about in front of the kids weren't so important a couple hours later, right? So anything important must wait until the kids are asleep. And you're going to find out that important stuff ain't so important. Here's a good one and a weird one and a funny one. Leave the toilet seat up. There's this sort of like boomer advice that's real normie. Don't leave the toilet seat up, guys. Girls don't like that. No. Leave it up on purpose. Because when you don't, she knows that she's winning the proxy war on the frozen peas. Don't give her the satisfaction. Just like you lift the seat, like you look where you're going down when you're going to urinate, right? I don't go, oh, the seat must be up. I'm going to go pee, and then the lid's down. Same thing. Does a woman just sit down and start urinating? Of course not. She sees that the lid's there. So if you can lift it up, so can she. Stop with the boomer stuff to leave the toilet seat down. Leave it up, guys. Here's this one. Copycat tactics to set boundaries, like we said with the Rommel. You can identify what their Rommel is because what they do. So copycat their tactics and set your boundaries. All right, we got this. Have a first date today. This is making me hopeful. Oh, we're corrupting the youth. Just have a good laugh. You could joke about it with her. You could joke about it. That's pretty funny. We got this. People argue in front of the kids because they're emotionally unstable and they're very mature and no sense of boundaries. From what I can see as an adult, not for nothing, Christians, non-Christians, almost everyone does it, and generally the women. It doesn't mean guys don't do it, but it's because usually like guys don't argue over the frozen peas as much. And so this comes up from the kids, and it's a form of leverage, sadly. I will corrupt the kids in front of you, right? So you give me what I want and shut up. So it's really using the kids as a bullet shield in this leverage game. And so you have to not fight in front of the kids. Go, this waits until after they go to sleep to try to take them out of harm's way. All right. So we got this. Tell him he's handsome when he does X, Y, or Z chore, right? Like, oh, babe, you're so sexy when you fix that thing. I like that. Well, then what's he going to do? He's going to want to fix more stuff, obvious stuff. I heard a joke, babe, you're sexy when you clean the dishes, right? What's he going to do? It's going to want to clean more dishes. Tell me sexy a little bit, right? I wrote handsome there. The word sexy might offend some people, but it's out there, right? It's an adjective. It's a little risque. We're trying to have some fun, okay? She doesn't want to be the boss, guys. Here's another silver bullet, unless it's an argument. So, like, don't really think your wife wants to decide all this stuff, all right? Make the decisions. Listen to what she has to say. She don't want to be the boss, all right? It's only the argument where it's like, oh, you never let me decide. In reality, you don't want to be the boss, okay? Here's another one. Don't become a fat slob. Both of you guys, women tend to care a little more to some degree. And when they let themselves go, they tend to do it worse than the guys do. But both of you guys and gals, don't let yourself go, all right? Don't become a fat slob. Granted, don't be OCD. It gets less important with age. Here's my little rule of thumb. For every year of marriage, you should gain about 1 pound. Think about it. After 30 years of marriage, you're about 50 something. If you weighed 30 pounds more, that's not crazy. You got married gals at 120. If you're 150, that's technically overweight, but like, right? You're not morbidly obese after 3 decades of marriage, right? Which people kind of do after 5 years because they become very dissatisfied. Weight becomes a way of conveying dissatisfaction. Same thing with dudes, right? Like you're 160, you might become 190, right? And it's going to be less muscle tone, by the way. But right, like it's not like you become like Homer Simpson, right? So a nice rule of thumb, pound per year of marriage is within the realm of reason. So if you want a number. Now here's a silver bullet. No one wants to see your sensitive side, dudes and gals. No one wants to hear your roar, right? She don't want to hear that. He don't want to hear that. All right. So be very gendered in your responses and how you communicate, because that's actually what the people want to hear. Guys don't want to hear women roar, and girls don't want to hear sensitive guys. Just how it is. Here's one. No one wants to understand you, right? Guys, stop thinking that like, even though she's a chick, that she's going to want to like care about your feelings. Like they kind of pretend that early on, but no one cares about your feelings. You're going to be very dissatisfied to find out priests don't. They'll tell you, we care, spiritual fathers, but that's catechesis. They're seeing the ideal. Deep down, no one cares about your feelings, sadly. That's the truth. That's the down dirty truth, right? And so you got to seek your emotional connection with God. Now, that doesn't mean that you should not care what these other people think. And depending on relationship, it might owe submission, right? But that being said, don't want someone to understand you, right? Because people don't want to. Here's one. She doesn't understand because she don't want to, or he doesn't understand because he don't want to, right? Don't think if I explain this better, this person will understand what I'm saying. No, they don't understand because they're putting no effort in it because they don't care what you think. So when you realize that, you don't get into all of the, explanations, right? Because that explanation then is kind of forcing an issue, an argument, and it shows weakness. Identify they don't understand because they don't want to understand, and then cut it off. That way you kind of disconnect the negativity from the situation. Now here's a good one. You can't change another person's feelings. Don't think if you argue enough, or if you're a dude, like you get strong enough, or whatever weird, stupid psychological thing, that this is going to definitely affect how the other person feels, right? You can make the environment to more positively direct where their feelings might go, but you can't change another person's feelings. So don't try to. All right? Don't try to change another person's feelings, because again, that only comes from within oneself. Now, here's another one. People want stability, not a therapist. Don't get into all the little details. Just gas them up. All right? Just make them feel good to say something that doesn't really get into the nitty gritty and, concurs with them. That's really all people want. They just want to be gassed up a little bit. They don't need a therapist. All right? And we got this. I knew it that nobody cared about my feelings. And we got this. You can make someone feel substantially worse. I don't know what one I'm guessing to care about feelings. Again, it's bad marriage advice. Bad marriage advice. Here's one. Don't seek help if you are a man. All right. Don't seek help. It is confused as weakness. I see this time and again. Guys that try to get like marital advice from priests and stuff. The priests, like, he don't tell you this, but they see you as a fool and you're weak because they're guys. And that's the subconscious. I mean, they should feel this way. But again, we're all human beings and we have to let people have the most positive circumstances possible so they can respond as positively as possible. So don't seek help if you're a man because it gets confused as weakness. Try to resolve these difficulties and work together with people, but without like thinking they're going to fix things for you. Now, again, disclaimer, if you're desperate, you're suicidal, whatever, get help. This is for generally, situations that are not going to be the end of the world. Here's a good silver bullet. Break the script they write. What's that mean? Sometimes people want to get into a fight. They think if I do this, this is how the crazy way they're going to respond. And then that gives me the right for this. So like an example for this, and it's a bad one. Honey, your noose is loose again. In the movie, I Think I Love My Wife with Chris Rock, he purposely gets in an argument with wife so he has a reason to storm out of the house so he could go in the club to be with other women. Now, obviously, this is very evil and bad, right? And so if the wife identified, wait, he's starting the fight, what do? You don't let the fight occur because they're starting it for a reason. They want this to go somewhere so they could get something or have an excuse not to do something or to be somewhere else or whatever. So you got to break the script. You have to identify, oh, there's some sort of script here. I'm going to break that script. And they're not going to know how to respond. All right? So break the script. Here's one. Fulfill your functions. All right? In your relationship, know what your roles are. Fulfill them. Play your role. And ignore excuses. Right? If you know, like, oh, I'm supposed to bring the kid to soccer practice, or I'm, on Friday nights, I'm supposed to do this. Don't use headaches. I need time to relax. Headaches. Video games. Oh, I want to play this. So, stupid guys, right? Fulfill your functions, right? Got to think of a household like a machine with gears, and the gear got to keep turning. Now, here's one for the one-income families. Don't be lazy. I see this all the time, right? Gals, here's the reality. If you're stay at home, he expects you're getting stuff done, and don't think he's happy if it ain't getting done. And don't expect he'll be, and don't think he should want to be happy if things aren't getting done. All right? He is a job. He expects you at home is a job, like a real job, right? He expects you'll take some breaks. He expects you will sit down and eat lunch and stuff. But he does expect there'll be nose to grindstone because he's got nose to grindstone. All right? So don't be lazy. Here's another one. Get out of your own head. Don't always get in the time machine. Don't always think like this is unfair. Don't even think about your feelings. And especially don't get to another person's head and think about their feelings. Deal with the present and don't deal with all the emotions, because that's actually how the demons try to trick you, right? They suggest ideas and particularly thoughts that are very with images. Like if you start thinking of things that are bad and they're picturesque in your mind, St. Maximus says that's literally the demons. So you could identify, oh, there's something spiritually going on here, right? So get out of your own head and live in the present and you'll be happy. Here's a good one. If there's boundaries, you don't do X, and that person, like people test boundaries. So they're going to ask for help. Honey, could you cut that vegetable? Or how do I do this? Right? Or how do I fix that? You tell them, you figure it out. Or, I need to get this done, but you're the one who knows to do it. And you're establishing a boundary. The perfect response is you figure it out. It's magic words. You figure it out. Because people aren't going to generally say, I don't know how to do it, because they want to say that they're smart and they can figure it out. So you figure it out. Here's one easy one. Avoid revenge. Like, seriously, do we need to be talking about this? Right? But people really do feel justified. You did this years ago, so I did this. Really? Like, I can't believe this happens. Like, it's so obviously a stupid idea, but it happens. So avoid revenge. Avoid revenge. We got Christ forgives all. My head will turn in half. From what, Christ? Christ forgives all. How's that happen? Here's the going. Don't fight a logic with logic. If someone's going all frozen peas with you and go, oh, these frozen peas are terrible because reason X and reason Y and reason Z, don't start reasoning with them, right? So you don't fight a logic with logic. You start responding with illogic. You start about frozen peas. You start talking about their mother-in-law. You start talking about like, oh, was the stove left on? You go into different directions that have nothing to do with addressing the concern. Because the wrong way to respond to something illogical is to try to make sense of it. It was never supposed to make sense. So don't fight a logic with logic. Guys, especially, men always try to fix issues, but if it's illogical, you can't fix it with logic. So don't try. Here's one. Don't take on the other gender's work or they'll make you do all of it. So like, guys, don't learn to cook because you're going to end up doing all the cooking, even if you work. It's crazy. And she stays at home. Or, she'll be like, oh, I didn't make anything. There's a frozen meal in the fridge. I know that a stay-at-home wife did that to her, does it to her husband regularly. I put a frozen meal in the fridge or this frozen meal in the freezer. All right. Or here's another one, gals. Don't learn to open a paint can. Of course it ain't hard. Big eye. Do I use a flathead? How do I open this thing? My fingers can't do it. Because if you learn to open that paint can, who's going to fix all those little things in the wall? Or the guy like, yo, the project needs to be done. Oh, could you help me? No. You got to establish boundaries. And so don't do the other gender's work or you'll be doing both. And they go, oh, you know how to open a paint can. You used to do that. Oh, yeah. I did that years ago. I guess I could. Oh, I'll do it later. And then just don't do it. So always do it later. And that's how you establish those gendered boundaries. Now, here's a good one for silver bullets. Mean what you say and then mic drop, right? So like, don't get to a whole argument. Say what you mean, drop the mic, walk away. Dudes, she heard you. Because legit, sometimes guys don't really like hear the mic drop. Like, because men have a certain way of communicating that's like certain logical. So, and women have this, circuitous way, but the circuitous thing, it's communicated. And you mic drop sometimes the guy actually really didn't hear you. They're like, what? But the woman knows what you said when you said it and dropped the mic. So just in general, it kind of cuts off the argument. Say your piece, then step away, right? Otherwise, you're just going to continue to the negativity. And you'll notice a lot of the theme here is not to feed into the negativity. It's to establish the boundary and then step away, right? Because what we don't want is continue negativity because you don't resolve negativity, which is illogical, by logically trying to fix it. You kind of just disengage from it, right? You can't stop a fire that comes from sin by throwing water in it, but you could run away from it. Or you could fireproof things somewhat by making better circumstances, but don't think you could face a fire head on. Now, we have this. Don't feed into negativity, even if they drag you in with, I just want you to explain. Oh my gosh, I made this mistake a million times. And I remember like trying to like really pour into stuff for hours, like go into the past and like really try to think all these little things. Is this what they meant? And like, and then the next day thinking to myself, like, was I really thinking this way? Like, and all that second guessing, like don't feed into the negativity. That's what the demons want, right? So just don't get into the negativity. If it's going negative, disengage. All right. Now we have, I hear you. So sometimes people want you to agree because they want you to agree to something because it makes you weaker and then they get more leverage in the relationship. Again, this comes from sin. It's not the way it ought to be. So how do we disengage in a way that doesn't cause an argument? You can tell them, I hear you. You didn't say you agreed. You didn't say you disagreed. It acknowledges what they said. So you're not going to say affirmative because no one talks that way. I heard what you just said. Thank you for communicating. No one talks that way. But you say, I hear you. Gets the job done. So there you go. There's a silver bullet for you. Here's a good one that this is more what women do. I don't know. I want to eat. Well, how about we eat Japanese? I don't want that. Whatever you want. All right. How about Mexican? No, just not Mexican. Well, how about Italian? Usually I want Italian. Don't get into the argument because it's a purposeful way of slightly degrading the man and making the man more reliant upon what you want. Guys usually don't do this, but if he's doing this to you, you got to disengage in this. And here's how you fix. I don't know what to eat. Just pick Cheesecake Factory. No one's ever unhappy with that choice. It's the easiest choice there is. I don't know what I want to eat. Cheesecake Factory, done. It's fixed. All right. Doesn't matter what social class you are. Everyone likes Cheesecake Factory. And they got meals in all price ranges because they're 1 billion calories. Just eat less so you can't afford all the expensive stuff. Leave a donation if this has saved you. That's probably the best piece of joke advice in this is don't know where to eat, pick Cheesecake Factory. Now we have this, be dismissive with anything negative. Now, obviously, not everything negative is not true. Not everything negative shouldn't be addressed. But your first instinct, because the demons feed off negativity, is to just be dismissive. If something's saying someone negative, I have to kind of infer what's the spiritual aspect behind this. And usually demons are the spiritual aspect behind negative stuff. It's just reality. So your first instinct should be dismissive. And especially if you realize it's frozen peas, act dismissive. Now we have this, again, obvious. Do we really have to say this? Dudes, keep your eyes and your minds where they belong. I hear this stuff from guys all the time where they're like, oh, don't hurt you if it's in your mind. Or if she's mad at you, you might as well look. No. Keep your mind and your eyes and mind where they belong. Gals, don't look at romance novels. Don't think about how your marriage could be better and all that negative stuff. Keep your eyes and your minds where they belong. Do we really have to be saying this on an Orthodox Christian channel? I mean, that's kind of the whole meat of the spiritual life, where Christ say that, something about the eyes of the soul. But the point is, the eyes are window of the soul is a popular proverb. Keep things where they belong, and you're going to have a better soul. It's not very complicated. Now, we have this. Does this dress make me look fat? Here's a silver bullet. Say yes. Even if you don't mean it. Does this dress make me look fat? Yes, it does. Why? I mean, it's, again, the rational, because it's an irrational question. The woman already knows how she feels. If she's even asking, she already feels negative about it. And so by actually responding, no, what you're doing is feeding to negativity because what's she actually looking for? To kind of grade at you and go, but it does. So by saying yes, she's not going to expect it. Right? It's breaking the script. So you go, yes, it makes you look fat. And then she might just say, no, I don't think so. And then she's happy with her dress. So what did you do? Golden rule plus, you responded with what she wanted to hear, not what you wanted to hear. So saying no allows for disagreeable rejoinders. So to disengage from the negativity, just say yes. So there you go. Give me a donation because you know that will help you. That will save you big time. Now we have this. Remind him that he's great and remind her that she's wrong. This sounds really weird. All right. So you got to use this like salt. Like you don't want to be this manipulative, negative ogre. But it does counteract what one's used to hearing. And we fix the bent branch not by putting it where it belongs, but actually by bending it all the other way. All right. So guys hear they're terrible all day. It's just how guys talk to one another. What you did wasn't the best, or your boss. Do this right. Like generally, women bosses will say it very circuitously, and they won't just like look a man right in the eyes. Generally say this is awful, unless they're a real jerk, right? So generally, and especially male bosses won't tell women this is awful. I worked in one of the worst offices ever where the boss almost hit someone in the face with a 1970s hardwood door where it could literally broke their nose. Like wham, cursing about and yelling and very horrible office. He had to resign in disgrace when he had his, with his pension and all that. So I've seen this in the real world. He did not get that bad with women because no one does, right? Guys are way more negative with guys. They don't want to tell women that they're awful and the worst thing that ever happened on earth, even if they feel that way, because they're as crazy as this insane boss was. And so that being said, because that's the case, well, how do we counteract this? Because this is how all of society operates. Well, every once in a while, you have to say, it's awful if this meal don't get done. Families got to eat by 6. How are we going to organize things? And you don't always want to talk this way because then you could be degrading your wife and be an awful husband. But every once in a while, you got to call something awful. And just so you know, wives, men are used to being called awful all day. So you go, oh, I'll just do the same advice to the guy. And you know what? If life was fair, that would work. He would stop doing awful stuff if you called it awful. But guess what? Don't work because life's not fair, right? Life's not fair, like your mom told you when you're 8, right? So life's not fair. So it actually doesn't work when you call a man awful, or it's awful when you do it this, because he's used to being called awful. So how do you correct male behavior? It's what the Bible says. You win him over without words. You do positive reinforcement because that's what he's not used to. He's used to being called awful all the time. So how do you get him stop doing awful things? You catch him doing good things, and you put the arrangements, the food's ready on time, so he comes home on time, where he actually does positive things, because calling him awful really don't work unless, again, public embarrassment, right? It's the only time it does work, but it's like a nuclear bomb, right? Hence, use like salt. Now, lastly, and guys, you run out of time for your bad marriage advice. We're going to have, and audience questions if you have it, right? Outdated marriage advice. I love this. This is funny. Outdated marriage advice. The boomer advice. So let's talk about the outdated marriage advice. We have, she's the boss. That don't work. She don't want to be the boss. That's reality. She sees that as weakness. So she's not the boss, boomer. Okay. We got this one. Happy wife, happy life, but she's not happy. She don't want to be happy, right? Because you get more stuff through incremental dissatisfaction. So it's not true. Unhappy wife, happy life is true, but you're not in control of her happiness, because that's red pill. You can't control it. Her happiness does affect your prayers, right? That does occur, but gals, don't look for the man to complete you. Your completeness comes from Jesus. He's the only man that can, right? So happy wife, happy life comes from inside of her. It doesn't come from you. All right. So remember, don't worry, be happy. And that's really the best you could do with responding to the outdated advice there. Now, here's in response to don't go to bed angry. Here's why this is outdated. Putting a time limit turns minor problems that could be ignored into major ones, and it empowers anger as a means of resolving conflict. And this creates bad incentivizing. Negativity, as we already said, should breed dismissiveness. If it's negative, I already should be dismissive how serious I should be engaging with this, right? So the better advice is to let the other person go to bed angry, right? They want to fight it out. I'm not gonna, right? Oh, if I talk about this now, I'm not going to sleep all night, and I won't do well in work tomorrow, and disengage from the negativity. So don't go to bed angry, outdated. Here's one, love languages. All right. This is outdated, and it tends towards the ego. There's some truth to it, of course. Men generally want words of affirmation. They want to hear an attaboy, especially from the women in their lives. They like gifts like home cooked food. All right. Quality time, which is a kind of gift, should be for activities other than the big restaurant or female TV, right? Like a lot of quality time really means what the wife wants to do. And this creates kind of disordered expectations in relationship, which makes women unhappy. So we don't want that. Women make their own money, right? So chocolate roses isn't meaningful anymore, right? So this idea of giving gifts to women is very outdated. That's why this is outdated marriage advice. It comes across as groveling and paying tribute, right? So if you're going to give a gift, it should be thoughtful and outside the box. Because in reality, women make their own money. You're not impressing them. And perhaps more useful is acts of service, which these love languages talk about. They're reminders of why we're needed. When you fix the car, you're reminded why you need it. When you cook the meal, you're reminded where you need it. So probably acts of service, those reminders of the leverage you have in the relationship, are the most meaningful love language, because it's the one most of you control, because it pertains to leverage. Now, here's one, meet in the middle. You always hear that. You should meet in the middle and compromise. But there's no boundaries if you do that. It sounds good if you don't think about it, but it only works when men had much more leverage and ground to give up. Because who's always compromising? Let's be honest, gals. It's the guy. The guy ain't compromising. The gal ain't, you're not compromising. It's the guy that's compromising. And when the guy does this, it seeds headship, which is perceived as the weakness, unclear boundary, makes someone unhappy. Then they look for security elsewhere. And you don't want that. Right? So this lack of security and boundaries in a relationship creates chaos. And so you don't want to compromise. What you want are firm expectations, right? That are lived up to, that people play their roles, not not compromise. You want firm boundaries, even if they're inadvertent. Now, here's some outdated advice. You hear this in the manosphere. I'm such a big man. I let my wife, right? Like, seriously, it's both sexist and lame. You let your wife? Like, come on, man. That's sexist and lame. It's used by fake trad guys to justify their compromises, right? Projecting their superior to other men when doing it. It's usually predatory. If you notice, a lot of these guys, they'll life coach you and take your money, right? Or it's monetized in some way. They got a Patreon. So it's predatory, right? I'm such a big man, and let me teach you how to compromise and not have boundaries and have worse problems. It's no good. And it's also egotistical that somehow he's so good he could pull it off. And if you become like him, you could pull it off too. It's nonsense. All right, it's nonsense. And this is a reason why in the fake tratosphere, if you notice, it's all about, guys, how to make you a real man, right? It's all about making you a real man, but it's never about the gals, right? Apparently women, 50% of the population, spiritually unimportant. Let's not talk about that. And those who do just want to beat up on women because they're like guys without chicks, or they're horrible perverts that don't respect women. So what you don't have is the via media. Again, bad marriage advice, so don't listen to this. What you don't have is the via media, where things ought to be in the middle. And so what we shouldn't have is I let my wife or whatever. We need boundaries and not these like fake compromises, right? This predatory advice or just guys pick yourself up from your bootstraps. No, both sides should be playing roles, and expecting that is not weird, because why else does the Bible have expectations that are gendered? Because people are supposed to be doing this. All right, so here's outdated advice. Don't keep score. Women always keep score. Are you kidding me? Women always keep score. They remember stuff from like the first 2 dates. They're always keeping score. So don't keep score is essentially, like cutting men at the knees in the relationship, because it comes natural for the gals out there to keep score. So how do we fix this? Men should keep score because they're awful at it, and women shouldn't. And then what you'll have is a moderation, right? Women shouldn't, which means they still will, but to do it less. And men should, but because it's not natural to them, they'll do it more, and you'll kind of meet in the middle. All right? A bend is repaired by bending it back in the whole opposite direction. And Father Daniel Sazoyev actually says that, by the way. Here's the outdated advice. Just listen to each other. Console each other. Absolutely not. Don't dig into feelings. It don't help. Almost always, these are just more profound. Does this dress make me look fat, or frozen peas sort of questions? These are pseudo dilemmas. You don't need to listen to everything, right? Do not give profound consolement. Just like, job, I don't know what to do. I could lose it. Yeah, your boss is a jerk. Because what you don't want him is feeding to negativity, losing sleep, and maybe actually losing that job, right? Yeah, your boss is a jerk. Or, women, especially with, women, their women bosses, they'll tell you the worst, absolute worst. And yeah, your boss is a jerk. Don't get too into it, because you go, oh, she's doing this, she's doing that. And you go down the list, and it's a lot of negativity. And that's no good for anyone. All right. My bishop has a thing. Again, this isn't his advice, but he has a picture of a dragon that he drew in Asian style. Apparently, he's quite accomplished artist. And amongst the things to kill the dragon is complaints, right? You want to kill the dragon by not complaining. So we don't go into the whole thing. You go, yeah, your boss is a jerk. Don't make a litany of complaints. It's not spiritually good. We want to disengage from negativity. Another thing is that's unfair, right? It's like I hear you. Yeah, that's unfair. You don't get into the detail. You acknowledge it, you vindicate them, and now you disengage. Gas them up. You really do a good job, right? Console them, but don't get into all the nitty gritty, because we don't want to delve into our negativity. It's not helpful. Getting to just listen to each other, outdated, don't help. Demons thrive of negativity. Here's outdated advice. In fact, you'll find this: make time for each other. The most successful long-term marriages where the spouses make no time for each other at all. They got separate lives. They live together. They love each other. They have dinner together just about, and everything else in their lives could be different, right? So make time for each other is manifestly wrong. Manifestly wrong. It's good for families, but not married couples per se, right? So you make time for each other by having certain familial activities. Everyone goes to the ball game, right? Everyone watches the fireworks. Everyone goes to the park, that sort of stuff. Everyone goes for a walk, Generally, these could be gender neutral family activities, right? Like, right? People know, oh, let's go all paint vases together and drink wine, right? You don't do that together as a family, right? But the family walk is gender neutral, or going to the ball games, obviously male centered. Generally speaking, family activities are male centered or gender neutral, but making time for each other is always female related, right? It's watching the female TV show, right? Generally speaking, she's not sitting next to you while you're watching the ball game, right? She might want to watch The Ghost Whisperer with you for some reason. And it's really a way of seeing how much of a man you are. She actually wants you to say no, not yes. She don't want you enjoying that chick stuff with her. Come on. So that being said, guys, you're generally not going to have the date activity like, oh, but we watched the ball game together when we're dating. Well, it's going to go away when you're married. Just saying, right? Just know that. You could get away with that with your kids, and after that, it goes away. Generally speaking, these are stereotypes for fun. So just know that it's mutually enjoyed, male-centric activities go away after marriage. But then making time for each other like that afterwards becomes very female-centric, which distorts the larger marital framework. So again, expensive restaurants, again, unless it's in that kind of edgy neighborhood, show you why you needed, bad TV, the chick shows, that stuff is bad. Don't make time for that, right? So you don't want the Ghost Whisperer. You kind of want to be Pete Rose guy. You watch your own TV. She wants to go, can we watch it? Pete, he's up the bat. He's going to go 4 for 4. He's going to get the cycle. Baseball, the cycle's when you hit a single, a double, a triple, and a home run, right? So you want to kind of be like that guy in the recliner. Like, no. Ohtani's up the bat. He pitched 2 innings, 3 strikeouts. Then he's going to hit the cycle. This might be the best game ever since Babe Ruth in 1919. You kind of be like that. You want to be having your own activity, right? So that being said, be Pete Rose guy. Here's outdated marriage advice. And people, it is profound, and that's why they overuse it. It's profoundly true, which is why it's overused. It's all your fault. People be like, I'm going to blow your mind. If you have the mindset that everything's your fault, you'll be humble, and the grace of God will attract all this positivity to your life. But here's the reality. It's not your fault if someone is literally abusing you. It's not your fault. Not in the direct sense if someone's literally abusing you. Now, to some degree, you have to come to grips with why is God permitting this? I've got a book about this, by the way, Fellowship with Christ's Sufferings. There you go. Right? So God does permit these bad things to happen. Why? He's healing us spiritually, because there's things in our past and sins in our lives or subconscious motivations that God realized by permitting us to suffer will be cured over time. But there's only so much. Here's the reality. You could rationalize this. All right, I've rationalized, wow, I really was bad with this issue as a teenager. And you know what? I really was thinking this way early in my marriage. And, I'll always probably struggle with this thing. All right, you've identified all this stuff. Is the issue going to go away? Not necessarily, right? Long suffering is what God is, and long suffering is how we become like Christ. So it's not going to go away just because you recognized it. And beating yourself up over it after you've recognized it doesn't accomplish anything, right? We kind of want these emotions in the middle. We don't want to be too sad with ourselves. We don't want to be too happy with ourselves. We just want to be obedient to God and pleased with the circumstances that God gives us, right? And so it's not your fault everyone's abusing you. It's good to identify that God's curing you and these things, these theological rationales, but to a limit, you have to learn to live with your circumstances. You got to still live a normal life. There's no spiritual father is going to tell you that the advice, just be normal, is bad advice. At the end of the day, just be normal is how you know you're doing it the right way. Now, what is the point of the advice of it's all your fault? The point of advice was for couples to stick it out, right? Wives, no, it's all your fault. Husbands, no, it's all your fault. Husbands have told this more, by the way. But think this way, and so whatever comes your way will be approached in a sense that's more humble, and you will be more patient with it. And yes, people should stick it out and be more humble, more patient. And so there's a point behind the advice, but it could get to the point where it's predatory and people don't know how to pivot these days. So yes, identify it's not always your fault, but sometimes you got to learn things from it. That's for sure. So that being said, this has been a ton of fun. And this is your last opportunity for questions. And I just want to remind people, if this has blessed you, you had a good laugh, or God forbid, it's going to help your marriage or relationship in some way. If that's going to happen, you got to talk to your spiritual father, because I'm not sure how I'm going to help you with your relationship. But if it has, please, Blessed Church of Cambodia, Orthodox Christian Theology.com/donate. Links to PayPal, Venmo, and Patreon are below. We have, as you see here, an issue with the fence. That's the original fence. The government destroyed it. Now it doesn't have it. It leads to potential break-ins for the church in Sihanoukville. In Cambodia, we have an anonymous donor that will match dollar for dollar up to $2,500 for donors that help build that fence. All right. And so it's a concrete structure. It actually has an outside bathroom. It's indoors, but like it's not in the building. The reason is so it's a hot country. It's just common there. And so there's going to be some plumbing and things involved. And we need donors, but we have a generous anonymous donor that dollar for dollar will match your donations. So just put in the memo that it's for the wall, WALL, not hard. And then we'll know to use the anonymous donors matching donations for your donation. If you decide to do Patreon, your first month will be matched by the anonymous donor. And so again, PayPal, Venmo, and Patreon all below. If this show has blessed you, Blessed Church of Cambodia. But of course, pray for me. Pray for the ministry and Cambodia. Consider becoming a missionary, which is even important than the money. And even you could get paid depending on your expertise and what you bring to the table. So if this has blessed you, bless the Church of Cambodia. We'd really like actually a young married couple in Cambodia, because that's exactly what the children there like working with the English classes. So consider that. So if this show has blessed you, bless the churches in Cambodia. And that's pretty much it. So guys, I look forward to your comments below. This has been a fun show, kind of a vanity project. People, I want Craig Truglia that covered the Ninth Ecumenical Council I never heard about, or to talk about this arcane doctrine about Nestorian canon law, which we will have a show in Nestorian canon law eventually. Interesting stuff in that Nestorian canon law. They had married bishops, believe it or not. They had married bishops. No one talks about that. But I like to do a little bit of everything. So thank you for sitting with me for my attempt at satire. It's been a lot of fun. So I'll end this show as I end all of them by quoting Jesus Rock: fight to death for the truth, and the Lord God will fight for you. God bless you. Have a great day.